It's Lucy Litch, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. Welcome back to another episode of Tiny House Conversations. Joining me on the show today is Brendan Woodley and Bayden Stinson, who are the co-founders of the tiny building company Removed Tiny Homes, who are based in Brisbane, Queensland. In order to demonstrate a different way of life that is more environmentally conscious and sustainable, Removed was established. Removed Tiny Homes accomplished this by building high-quality off-grid tiny homes with architectural designs. They support the tiny house movement because they think everyone should have the chance to own a home, and they do it by providing a variety of reasonably priced and environmentally friendly solutions. They're constantly exploring for ways to enhance their production processes and lessen waste output, energy usage, and home-related environmental damage. I asked Brendan and Bayden to join me on the show as I've been looking for tiny house builders who focus on building healthy tiny homes and are actually doing it properly. And in this conversation, we talk about the 4 key pillars that Removed focus on, including low-tox building materials, sustainable construction, off-grid innovations, and carbon-neutral supply chain. We also talked about the methods they use to minimize moisture and mold, as well as the methods they use to reduce electromagnetic fields in your tiny home. And I was really impressed to know that they actually consult with a building biologist in order to be able to serve their clients better who really value a healthy tiny home. They also talked about the different tiny house models they offer and their mission to make a positive impact in the tiny house space and affordable housing industry, and so much more. And I know the demand for healthy tiny homes is continuing to rise because I'm seeing questions about it in different tiny house Facebook groups all the time. So if you're someone like me that's passionate about your health and it's a priority for you to reduce the toxins in your home, to create the healthiest home possible, you want to listen to this episode. So with all that being said, on to this tiny house conversation with Brendan and Bayden. Brendan and Bayden, welcome to Tiny House Conversations. It's so good to have you here.
Hey, Lucy. It's so nice to meet you. It's so nice to be here as well.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And you guys are a tiny house building company that I was telling you just when we were offline before that I came across, I think sometime towards the end of last year in different Facebook groups. And you have a focus on low-tox building as well as off-grid. And so I would love to, excited to get into that today with you guys. But first, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and just how you came to be specialized in building tiny homes.
Yeah, so I'll get started. I'm Brendan, for those of you listening. So for me, my journey to get to tiny homes has been a bit of an up and down roller coaster. But essentially, I studied property development at university, and I had a focus on sustainable property development. That was always my goal growing up. I always wanted to help develop the world in a sustainable way. And so when I completed that degree, I actually went and did a diploma of sustainable operations as well, which is more or less just learning how to run a sustainable business and how to implement sustainable practices across supply chains. And anyway, after I finished all of my studies, I landed a job as a national sales manager for a builder, which is basically where I started learning how the whole construction industry works from deposit all the way through to completed handover of the home. And at the same time I was doing that, I actually had a side hustle where I was renting out luxury camper vans on the Gold Coast that had a similar aesthetic to what we currently build in our tiny homes. And that's what kind of got me into the whole sustainable, small living space as a business. And I guess I wanted to find a way to implement some of these sustainable practices, and I wanted to get out of the camper vans just because of a whole bunch of reasons. And I ended up approaching Bayden, who was a lifelong mate of mine. And I guess you can explain a bit about how this all came to be.
My journey is similar but different as well to Brendan's. Mine doesn't come with the degree. Mine's more self-taught. I have been around property and real estate from a young age, actually acquiring a few homes and managing them myself. I built one as well. And so I've seen a lot of friends and family really struggle to get into the property market, the way that it has sort of exploded and got out of reach within the last 5 years. And that's where it sort of lit the fire in my belly to be part of this business. Me and Brendan, like you discussed, have known each other for a very long time. We actually worked together as teenagers at Domino's, and we've always had the same sort of business objectives, and we've always wanted to start a business. And like he mentioned, he has actually had his own business before. And we got together at the end of 2021 and sat down and actually introduced this business idea to me. And I felt immediately that we just clicked, and it's exactly what we needed to do. So from there, it was all systems go. And not so long after, here we are.
You guys have got a bigger mission than, just building tiny homes for people, although that is, such a great thing, because it obviously it gives people the opportunity to cross into the world of maybe more affordable housing, if that's something that, they're working towards, maybe, reducing the cost of living, and also many other benefits like creating more freedom and reducing the impact on the earth, and lots more things like that. But I'm just curious about like the bigger mission, because like we talked offline before, and just from observing what you guys have been doing, you're really focusing on low-tox, sustainability, off-grid. So like what is that bigger mission for you guys at Removed?
Yeah, so I think a great starting point, I guess, is to describe what removed means. So removed, if you look up the definition, it actually means separate or remote in space, time, or character. So for us, the reason that we loved the idea of the name removed was because that represents a person and a way of living. Someone who wants to disconnect from the 9 to 5, move away from the white picket fence suburban lifestyle. They don't really care about keeping up with the Joneses or what the news is saying every day. And this is the sort of person, I guess, or lifestyle that we're selling to an extent. And I guess that directly ties into our overall mission as a company, which is to help the world transition towards sustainable and affordable housing. In our opinion, and I think this is coming across online as well with our presence, in order to live removed, you somewhat have to sign up to the idea of living off-grid and living sustainably and living within your means and minimizing your waste and energy production. And I think all of these ideas, these bigger ideas of our mission tie really well into the name Removed. And so obviously the idea of transitioning the world towards sustainable and affordable housing, it's a large goal. We're well aware of that. And it's not something that we believe we can do overnight by any means. This is like a 15 to 20 year goal. Fortunately for both of us, we're very long-term orientated. We're not in a rush. We're very patient. And for us, we decided early on that if we were going to build a business, we didn't want to just build a business that was there to generate cash flow. We wanted to build a business that was actually going to have a long-lasting positive impact. So, I mean, within that mission, we're obviously hoping to positively impact the construction space with sustainable practices and methods, and ultimately make it easy for people to live comfortably off-grid in a sustainable house. Because I believe there's like this idea that living off-grid has to mean, a long drop toilet and having a ceiling fan and never being able to use your TV and having no appliances and stuff like that. I guess we're wanting to redefine that. And for us, the easiest starting point was tiny homes, but by no means is that where we're going to finish. And I guess over 15 to 20 years, we eventually hope on getting across the entire construction industry into larger scale developments. But for now, tiny homes is the greatest starting point for us because they are so easy to build off-grid and to build sustainably.
Yeah, I think that that's a really great starting point too, because the idea of low-tox living and sustainability and, just healthier building practices and healthier things that the homes are constructed with is very much in alignment with the tiny house way of life. I mean, for some people, it may not be as the most important thing, but I think in a general sense, I know, and I can speak from experience as well as just knowing many people in the tiny house world and talking to people offline, talking to people on the podcast, that, you know, that is something that is super important to people, especially when they're just trying to be healthier and well in many different ways, not just, you know, physically, but mentally, emotionally, maybe spiritually as well. So I think it's a really great starting place. And also, you know, we were talking offline before too, that I've said for a while, if someone can come in and do healthy tiny homes, like really, really well, and not just it be this idea of, okay, because it's a smaller footprint, that means that it's eco-friendly and like it's 100% eco-friendly, or that means it's completely like there's no toxins at all, or, you know, that kind of thing, when in reality there are definitely some benefits of having that smaller footprint and being conscious with, you know, how you're managing your waste and, you know, reducing your use of water and you know, all those types of things too. But you know, the reality is as well is that there's still construction methods or building materials or building practices that are not necessarily conducive to being eco-friendly or to being healthy. And so I love that, you know, you guys are really focused on all of that kind of stuff. And you mentioned there before, Brendan, about sustainable construction methods. So are you able to go into that a bit more for us all and just let us know like what those types of methods are, or anything you can say about that?
Yeah, so as a business, what we've identified is that there's 4 key pillars and unique selling propositions that we can really dial in on in order to differentiate ourselves and become the most sustainable tiny home builders in the country. And one of those pillars is sustainable construction. So this ties back into the education that I did prior to doing all of this. We learned a lot about supply chains and how to create closed loop supply chains, which is basically where you're recycling more or less a lot of the supplies that are coming into the factory. So the ways that we do this at our factory is we're separating everything on site post-construction into each of their individual categories. So timber offcuts, steel, plastic, cardboard, polystyrene. Like if anyone who's listening is familiar with the most recent season of The Block, this is something they actually did on The Block as well. And it's in order to obtain a higher rating for your building. But in the tiny home space, you can't actually obtain these ratings yet because it's still somewhat unregulated by the government. But either way, we're implementing these practices early on just because we feel like these practices, if we start implementing them, even though they're not proprietary to us, and that basically means that any builder could replicate what we're doing. We actually would love to see that because that ties into our overall mission as a company. But essentially, once each of the items has been separated into its category, we have recycling partners across Southeast Queensland that specialize in recycling the individual items. So, for example, our timber waste offcuts of VJ and plywood and such, it is recycled into wood chips and made into animal bedding and composting and pallets and stuff like that. Our polystyrene is actually broken down into chips. It's blown into a chamber. It's reheated and then reused for packaging. This is a great one because obviously if that ends up in landfill, it doesn't really break down for hundreds of years. And then stuff like our steel and plastic and cardboard, that's a little bit easier for people to imagine how that can get recycled. That's already pretty standard in the recycling space. But more or less what it means is that the only stuff for us that's really hitting a landfill is the sort of miscellaneous construction rubbish like electrical waste or maybe a PVC pipe or broken tiles, stuff like that. And I guess that ties into what you were saying earlier about how it's impossible to be perfect, but I think we're trying our best to implement processes that enable us to at least do the best that we can with the technology and the resources that are currently available to us. But obviously, like I said to you, our goal is for this to start happening across the construction industry. So we actually welcome the idea of other builders starting to continue using these practices as well.
Yeah, because that creates, I think, more momentum in the industry, and obviously there's a higher demand for this kind of stuff too. And I think, yeah, paving the way for that to be more of a standard practice and actually showing people, I think, what's possible too. I mean, I've spoken to so many tiny house builders, and they all have different focuses and different specialties and different experience that they bring to the table. And, maybe if they're not necessarily focused on, say, something like reducing waste, like what you guys are talking about, which I think is fantastic, because as humans, we're doing so many things that are not great to the earth, and one of them is all the waste that we're creating and really impacting the land and everything. If someone's not educated on that, or it's just not their area of focus, it's an opportunity to show them what's possible, to educate them on like why this is important and actually like how it can be done. So I love that you have that view of not trying to keep it to yourself, I suppose, because it could be very easily like that. But I think that it also means that it's kind of good for everyone. It's good for the tiny house community. It's good for the building companies. It's good for people that are looking towards this way of living, and it's, good for the planet. So I think, I love that. And you mentioned before there as well, so 4 pillars. Do either of you want to go in further into some of the other ones?
Yeah. So the 4 pillars, just to rattle them off real quickly. So we got off-grid innovations, low-tox materials, sustainable construction, and then carbon neutral supply chain. I'm happy to dive into any one of those. We can start wherever you feel, but
oh, okay. Well, you just did sustainable construction methods. Maybe the last one. That would be interesting.
Carbon neutral?
Yeah.
So the thing with supply chains is that across the supply chain, a lot of the time, the majority of greenhouse gas emissions actually come from the transportation sectors of materials.
Yeah.
So quite often it's the traveling between from supplier A to supplier B to supplier C to us, then to the client. That's where a lot of the emissions are actually generated throughout the construction space. So because of that reason, the construction industry as a whole actually accounts for it's something crazy, like 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And so for us, we realize that, we can do all that we can, but that's still not really going to make a drastic impact, even if we're perfect. So just a few ways that we are trying to, I guess, make a positive impact across the supply chain is, in the short term, what we're doing is we're calculating the amount of emissions across all of our materials, from raw materials all the way through to the completed home being delivered to our clients. And essentially, we're carbon offsetting the entire amount of the emissions that's been created from our homes. And by carbon offsetting, for those of you that don't know, it's as simple as planting trees in order to carbon offset the amount of carbon that's been emitted into the atmosphere throughout the construction. So short term, we're just planting trees. Well, not just planting trees, but we're planting trees in order to carbon offset our production. But I guess long term, and this is where we'd like to get to in the next 2 to 3 years, is to start working with our partner suppliers and assist them in making their individual factories and their production processes more sustainable. So, this might be going to our window manufacturers or our frame manufacturers or trailer manufacturers and assisting them to begin implementing the same sort of strategies that we've implemented at our factory at the last step of the supply chain.
That's fantastic. And it's just reminding me that there's all these different hidden things that we may not necessarily be aware of. And you're talking about like the transportation and the fossil fuel industry and all of that all of this stuff is included in the inputs that go into making these homes. And so if you really want to be eco-friendly, like, you've got to look at these types of things as well and really take it seriously, because however many people there are in the world, even if it seems like, oh, it's such a big scale and, what can I do to make a difference? It's actually like these smaller things that we look at that then, the context of the industry and what you guys are doing in the tiny house space, it can be this real knock-on effect that could make that, larger scale positive impact. And again, demonstrating what other tiny house builders could be doing as well with their practices. So I'd love to cover the off-grid stuff in a little while. But if you want to go deeper into the other, I can't remember what the other one was now, but the other pillar.
Low-Tox materials.
That's it. Oh, yeah, of course. That's the main thing. So can we talk about how... Yeah, it's funny. Can we talk about some of the features of the builds that you're able to make either chemical free or low tox or low VC, or just what healthier options are available?
The easiest place to start is materials. So for those listening, just to start off with the basics, the definitions. So one of the most common toxins that's found in homes is formaldehyde. Now, this is a glue that's used in the production of a lot of plywoods and a lot of chipboards. It's used as a component within the production process. And essentially, there's a national body that recognizes this and tests materials that are produced by manufacturers. And there's a rating system in place for the amount of formaldehyde off-gassing that occurs for particular materials. Now, the lowest rating that you can achieve on this rating index is super EO rated, E0 rated materials, and E0. So super E0 would be something like 0.03 parts per million from my memory, and E0 is 0.05 parts per million formaldehyde. So what we do is we make sure that all the materials that we source for the home, from the subfloor to the internal linings, the external claddings, the ceilings and the joinery, and any of the timber especially, we make sure that at worst, we're sourcing E0 rated products, which for those listening as well, E0 is more or less zero rated for formaldehyde, just because after production's finished, it actually off-gasses within about a week or so. So if you're using super EO and EO rated stuff, by the time your home is delivered to you, there's almost no traces of formaldehyde in the air. So that's the key difference, I guess, with us, is that we're putting in that extra effort to source those sort of materials. And then I guess the next thing that's most common in the low tox sort of space is volatile organic compounds, or VOCs as they're commonly known. Now, these are chemicals or components within chemicals that are found within a lot of paints and stains and glues. And a lot of the polyurethane glues will have really high levels of VOCs, and a lot of paints and stuff will as well as timber products and stuff like that. But just like with our timber products, where we put in that extra bit of effort to source stuff that's low rated, we pay a little bit of extra money to source the paints and glues and stains that have low or no VOCs. A little bit more money to us, it makes sense, because it benefits our overall mission and it helps lead this healthy home construction space. So we don't mind it, but I guess that's probably one of the main reasons you don't see every builder doing it. And then there's stuff like earth wool insulation and the WeatherTex cladding, and making sure we use steel frames instead of H3 treated timber. Now, that's two reasons we do that: to save weight, but it's also because the H3 treated timber is full of so many toxins. It can't actually be recycled in any way. It can't be turned into wood chips, can't be turned into pallets. Nothing can be done with it. It can only go to landfill. It can't be burnt. So we want to steer clear of timber frames for that specific reason. So we stick to doing steel frames. There's also less wastage on our end, and the wastage that does get generated from the steel frame manufacturers can then be recycled into future steel frames as well. And then, low VOC paints, it's the sort of stuff that you find in hospitals. So it's kind of hospital grade stuff. And it's just to make sure that, every material we're choosing is as carefully selected as it could be. I guess Bayden can elaborate on a few other things as well.
Yeah, another big thing to us that sort of ties in with the materials is ways to prevent mold. We use an air gap between the sarking and the cladding. This just allows for extra airflow. A lot of people don't do this, but it just reduces the moisture in between those two aspects. And we also use a class 4 breathable membrane instead of cheap sarking. So basically this means that the moisture and airflow can get through the membrane, because when it can't breathe, this is what traps moisture and creates the risk of mold, essentially. We waterproof all our wet areas in the bathroom. This is professionally done. And we use a marine grade clear coat on all of the timbers, especially in the wet areas, to avoid moisture damage. These are most commonly used on boats and things like that. We flash around all our windows and skylights and cap off the roof, which is extremely important, as these are the points of major weakness in the build. And these are all done by specialised roofing contractors to ensure everything is done to best practice. And this comes with a 7-year warranty as well.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just add on to that a little bit as well. So when we did our first Low-Tox build for our first client, actually, it was a huge learning curve for us. And to be honest, we're still learning in this space. We don't claim to be experts. All we're doing is we're just regurgitating the things that experts have told us. So our first client, just to make her feel a little bit more assured that we were doing the right things, we actually included an appointment with a building biologist in with the price of her build. And that appointment, me and Bayden went to together, and we sat down with this building biologist with the client, and we sat down and went over all the designs. And she was concerned about mold and EMFs and low-tox materials. And he was the one that basically passed on a lot of his knowledge. So what I would also say is that moving forward with any low-tox builds, if any clients wanted to build with us and they wanted to build something custom and we're doing stuff that's a bit out of the ordinary, we're more than happy to sit down with this building biologist again and go over the finer details with a professional and get their tick of approval to say that we're doing the best practices. They're the ones that actually taught us about a lot of those mold prevention things, and even stuff like EMF. I'm not sure how many listeners is interested in that, but we also have options with reducing EMFs within homes as well. And that all came from that building biologist. So it's great to be able to share that knowledge. But yeah, I just want everyone to know that if they ever came to us, we'd be happy to sit down with them as well so they could hear it straight from the professional's mouth.
That's so amazing, seriously, because I mean, going through my own tiny house build process and design and all of that, I consulted with a building biologist as well as like different mold and EMF experts, quite actually 3 different EMF experts, because those things are really important to me. And I just find it super impressive that you guys are actually taking it upon yourselves to contact a professional building biologist, and you're open to kind of, consulting with them to learn more about it for yourself and to be able to serve people in this way, that this kind of stuff's really important too. And so I just think that's so great that you're doing that, because, I would love to see that in every building company. I think that's so important, because the reality is the built environment is somewhere that many of us spend a lot of time. And if you're living in a place that's moldy or is prone to mold and moisture, that has toxins in the building materials, that's a super high electromagnetic environment, over the long term, that stuff really can impact our health. Maybe we don't necessarily notice it in the short term, but I think the long term is going to be where it counts. And, this kind of stuff is something that I'm trying to do my best to bring into the tiny house space, because I don't really feel like that many people are talking about it. And I guess just for the listeners at home, if you haven't, so since we're talking about building materials, EMFs and mold, I'll put a link in the show notes to those episodes that I've done with the different experts on those, because if you're really interested in these types of things, there's some great information there. I'm curious, just you mentioned there with the EMF friendly stuff. So when I did the design of my home, I asked the building company to do specific things with the electrical wiring so that it wasn't around my sleeping area or my lounge area, which would be the 2 places that I spend most time. And then I made sure that I have no wireless electrical devices in my home at all. I've got, Ethernet for internet. I hardwire my iPhone. I think I probably go above and beyond what many people might be willing to do. But that's just one thing that's important to me. But I'm just wondering for you guys, like, what kinds of stuff can you do for people in the builds when it comes to reducing electromagnetic fields?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, honestly. So for us, I guess the building biologists described the exact same things to us. So we actually use a shielded cable, which is used in industrial factories as well. So that was, I guess some might say that's a little bit overkill, just because it's not so much the amount of electromagnetic fields that are traveling through wires that's dangerous. Like you said, it's more so the appliances and having them near your sleeping areas. But for this client, she was more than happy to pay for this inclusion. So yeah, we do shielded cabling. And another tip that the building biologist gave us was to run a lot of the wiring through the hallway or through the non-living spaces. So it's almost like you can imagine like the spine of the home was running up and down the hallway with just offshoots of cables running to the LED light switches and the LEDs themselves or whatever it might be. And then exactly like what you said, Ethernet cabling for the entire house so that there's no Wi-Fi. And then keeping the appliances away from the sleeping areas was another one. And what we did on our most recent delivery for the last build that we did EMF rated, we actually did isolation switch for each of the loft bedrooms. So that at the switchboard at nighttime, the client could turn off all the power going to that room at nighttime before they went to bed. It was like a separate, they were on their own circuits on the switchboard. So that was just another step that we went, but more or less it was exactly what you described, plus those few things. And, it's not a standard inclusion for us just because what we're finding is even in this Low-Tox space, it's still not the most commonly asked thing. But yeah, we're more than happy to accommodate those sorts of requests as well, because it's something that we've done previously. And fortunately, we have a bit of knowledge about it now as well.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, shielded cabling was one of the top things that I had a naturopath, Amy Skilton, who's an EMF expert on the show. And that was like one of her top things. She said, if there's one thing I could recommend you do, obviously there's many things, but like the shielded cabling thing. And I love the isolation switch idea. She did mention if that's possible too. So yeah, I think it's just fantastic that you guys are able to do things like that. And I feel like, the EMF thing can be a bit of a controversial topic. Some people don't believe that it is a problem, although I guess it's a bit of a rabbit hole to go down, industry and science that's been funded by industry and all that kind of stuff. But I genuinely feel that more and more people are going to start to care about this kind of stuff more. And I would love to see more tiny house builders pay attention to this too. And this is one reason why, like, I talk about it a lot on the podcast, and I even talk about stuff like blue light and artificial lighting and that kind of thing too, which relates to the EMFs, because it's part of the same thing. Like, it is about our health and wellness. So I love hearing that you guys are, you're onto it, and hopefully you can pave the way for more tiny house builders to pay attention to this kind of stuff and show them what is possible. Let's go into the other pillar, which is off-grid, which I know that you guys do off-grid packages. So do you want to tell us a bit more about those and like what's included and how all of that works if someone's interested in off-grid options for their tiny home?
We've got a few different tiers of off-grid packages, depending on the sort of features and inclusions that you want. But more or less, when we looked at the market when we were starting this thing, what we realized is a lot of builders, they will, they'll have their solar package, and then they'll have their grey water system, their grease trap, and they'll have everything listed as an optional extra. And then, they'll put their own builder's margin on top of each of those items, which means that if a client comes and says, I want solar, like that's probably the most common request that you get as a tiny home builder. Everyone says, I wanted to have solar as well. But what they're saying when they say they want solar is that they're actually saying they want to be off grid. They're meaning that they want the inverter, they want the battery, they want the roof mounting kit, and then that's a lot of the time that's going to mean they're going to need all the water stuff that comes with it. So rainwater tanks, gutters and rain capture, water pumps, water filters for the home and for the sink, grey water systems, grease traps. So what we kind of realized is if we just bundle this all together and put it all together as a single package deal for clients, it means when they come to us, if they say, we like the Byron Bay home and we want it Low-Tox materials, but we also want it to be off-grid, we can kind of just add everything all in together, and we can explain to the client how all of it all ties in and how it all works. And we have brochures and informational booklets that we give out to clients as well that more or less explain to them exactly what they need to do for site setup. We can organize trades to come out to site after the home is delivered, and the trades can hook up everything exactly the way it's supposed to be done. And I guess so it comes from wanting to make it convenient and easy, and also wanting to reduce the cost of it, because by bundling it all together, we're not adding margin to each individual item, which means our off-grid packages, we can proudly say, come in anywhere from 5 to 10 grand under the market. And we're very proud of that because, to be honest, it aligns very strongly with our overall mission. And that was probably one of our first unique selling points, was our off-grid packages. And now, obviously, since then, we've had client requests for, different water filters that have UV lights and stainless steel water tanks and heavy duty water pumps and bigger batteries and different solar panels. So we've kind of defined 3 tiers, which is your essential, your comfort, and then your luxury. And the best thing with us is, even with the essential off-grid package, it still comes with a 10 kilowatt hour battery and 6 415 watt panels, which at $19,990, we know for a fact that battery system and those solar panels through someone else, it's probably going to cost you about 20 grand. But then we throw in all of the other things with it as well. And that battery is enough to power a home, probably not an aircon, but it's still plenty of juice to keep you going for multiple days at a time without sun, which is another factor because it reduces the amount you have to use your diesel generator to top up your battery. And then as you go up in the tiers, so like our middle tier has a 12 kilowatt hour battery, and then our top tier has a 16 kilowatt hour battery, a stainless steel water tank, a UV light for the rainwater filter as well. And that's still coming in at 27,000. So that as well, we know, we're confident in that because the battery is so large. One of our clients actually that got that battery, we spoke to him recently, and he was telling us that since he's been living in his home for the last 4 months, his battery hadn't dropped below 60%, even when he had a week of overcast weather. And on the days where he got sun, he was getting less than 3 hours of sunlight a day. And he has an air conditioner that he runs as well. But for example, in that home, we put a really efficient air conditioner into the home that was only pulling 500 watts an hour, but his solar panels were pulling in 2.5 kilowatts every hour. So he was still charging his battery with his air conditioner running on a cloudy day, which means that he can live comfortably. He can play his PlayStation 5. He can have his air conditioner running during summer and still be charging his battery and still have plenty left over. So I guess these are just the starting points for off-grid innovation. But long term, or not even that long term, by May, we're actually going to have a fully off-grid factory that's going to be powered by solar panels. It's going to have a rainwater tank and be run off rainwater. And it's going to have a Talex waste management system for the wastewater, which is like a septic system, but it's a little bit more complex. And it basically allows you to use all of your wastewater in your gardens, and it treats it all in a different way. So we're going to have all of that set up by May, which is super exciting for us as well, because that ties into the sustainable construction side of the business. But yeah, we're just constantly looking in this space of how can we make off-grid living easy for clients and make it so that they can not sacrifice their way of living in order to live comfortably off-grid.
Wow, you guys are really taking things to the next level. That's really impressive. An off-grid factory. Yeah. Wow. You were talking about solar there, and I'm just curious, I guess, going back to the EMF type thing, because I've got a solar trailer and I was actually able to customize some of the parts because not often, but I think always the inverter has quite high electromagnetic fields, specifically magnetic fields, but can also have high wireless fields, which I think is the biggest problem, especially if it's in closest proximity to you. So do you have options to customize things like that? Like if someone wanted to have an inverter that where you could switch off the wireless and you can switch off the Bluetooth, that type of thing?
Yeah, exactly. So our standard inverter doesn't actually come with the wireless aspects and the Bluetooth either. You can actually get a router that you connect to the inverter. Yep. So that basically, I guess, prevents some of that occurring. Other thing as well is that the solar panels that we use, they don't need to be mounted on the roof. For some clients, like what you described with the solar trailer, the sun may not be able to hit the roof of the home because they're parked in under trees. So exactly. In those circumstances, we actually put the solar panels further away from the home, and we let our clients know that they should just dig in a small trench and run the cable through the ground to the battery system. And now with that, we actually, in all honesty, we haven't actually done a home where the client was concerned about EMS that was also off-grid. So we haven't actually, in all honesty, faced, I guess, that sort of question. But I guess that's what I would say in that regard, is that there is a way for us to separate the solar system away from the home. And then also, it doesn't naturally come with the Bluetooth or the Wi-Fi system either.
Oh, so good. That's so good. I'm just very impressed by you guys, and just the extent that you're going to, really just walk the walk, I suppose you could say. And I would love to go into a bit more about, your tiny house models. If you want to maybe just share what they are, like if they've got different names and what their features are, what sizes and things like that.
So we basically, with our tiny home models, we like to keep it quite easy on our website. We don't want to overwhelm customers and give them the decision paralysis and everything else that comes with having heaps of different options. So we have 4 standard models on our website. We're probably going to add maybe a 5th and maybe a 6th in the near future. But essentially, our Burley model is a 6-meter single story, and you can add a second loft to that as well, an office loft if you'd like, as an optional extra. Our Currumbin 7.2, that's our flagship model. That is a 7.2 meter single loft with a stairway up to the loft and a standing platform beside the bed. Our Byron Bay 8.4, which is our other flagship. And by flagship, I mean that like the majority, like 80% of our builds are Currumbins or Byron Bays or variations of those designs. And so our Byron Bay 8.4 is the stereotypical 8.4 meter double loft with a stairway and a walkway that connects the 2 lofts with a standing platform beside the bed that we can adjust and make the standing platform portion of the home whatever your height is. So if you're 1.9 meters or 1.6 meters, we can move that standing platform up and down so that your home suits you, so that you can stand up when you're upstairs as well. Our 4th design is a 9-meter single story, no loft. We basically believe those 4 designs is a good foundation for a lot of people that want to customize to start from. And I would say most builds end up having some level of customization to it. It's very rarely we're doing a stock standard base model of any one of our 4 designs, but more or less they're just there to help clients get an idea of what they could do. But at the same time, we are happy to do a complete speccing from scratch. And we have in-house draftsmen that can do plans and also do renders if you're the sort of person who needs to visualize the home and see it with your own eyes. Prior to committing, we can get renders done up of the inside and the outside as well. And our renders, we believe, I don't know if you've seen any of our renders online, but our renders, we believe, are quite realistic and professional. We're quite proud of them, and that makes the clients easier for them to picture their custom homes.
Yeah, and how much customization can people do if they're wanting to, like, can they make adjustments to the base models or even just start from scratch?
Literally anything they want, yeah. Literally anything they can imagine. So the thing is, for us, like, well, for me, like what I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I was the national sales manager for a builder for a number of years, and in doing so, I've actually helped clients design homes, and I've sold about 80 homes in the actual real estate market prior to this tiny home business. So I guess that's where my strong suit is, as well as obviously on the back end business operations side of things. But I really am good at helping clients sort of make decisions and refine their design and offering my own suggestions based on experience of things that they should do or change. And yeah, if they come to us with a little sketch and an idea, we can help them turn that idea into a reality.
So good, because I think that's another thing that I find quite rare in the tiny house build space is the ability to customize. And I completely understand why. I mean, there's so many moving parts, and often, when something is changed from, say, a base model, then other parts of the build, it might need to shift things in that. And it's just, you can go a lot of back and forth. I totally get it. But I really respect businesses that are offering high level customization, because that was one of the things that was important to me too is to be able to customize certain things, like, you know, making things more natural and doing the electrical wiring and all that kind of stuff. And I know that that's important for a lot of other people too, that will be listening to this. So it's great to know that, you know, you do high level customization. And do you want to walk us through the process of what it looks like to work with you as a customer if someone's interested in either starting the build process with you guys, getting on your build schedule, or however that works, or maybe if they even just want to know a little bit more about, you know, just how everything works with you guys and all of that. Yeah, whatever you can share about the process.
Yeah, a lot of our information is found on our website, and if you reach out for a consultation, this could include a site tour. We can organise to show you previous builds and what we've got going on at the factory. But yeah, if you did want to get into the process of doing your own home, once you have the basis of your design, we can provide a quote pretty quickly. And you don't need to have all your details locked in, just need an idea of the overall design. And basically, once you know that you're ready to build a home, even if you're not completely sure on all the final details, all we need is a $5,000 deposit. And what this does is locks in your building slot, and it lets us order a trailer. And then the remainder of the 20% deposit, we require 6 weeks out from the build date. So then we can begin to order our windows and frames and pay the rest of the trailer deposit. And basically, so at that point, you would have your build locked in and all the details, I suppose, confirmed. And then from there, we have 4 more 20% progress payments at the trailer stage, frame stage, the enclosed stage, and then the complete stage. And the final payment obviously can be withheld until the home's inspected and you're happy with everything. And then we would organise the delivery.
And do you guys deliver all around Australia?
Yeah, so we deliver nationwide. We actually have partners that we use. We've tried moving tiny homes previously ourselves, and we just learned that tiny house transportation it's the whole business of its own. Yeah. And like Rick down at Havenwood and a few of the guys, even the guys at Houseman, like we know they move their own trailers, and massive respect to them. They told us some stories just in our travels and in our times meeting them at tiny house expos, and you know, they're animals. We couldn't imagine getting out there and doing the sort of stuff that they're doing. So yeah. we kind of offload those responsibilities to either Martin at Tiny House Transport Australia. He's obviously an expert in this field, or Mark down at Tiny Towing Australia. And then there's also a third company that we can use as well. If the home is a bit bigger, if it's a bit heavier, if it's got to get to a difficult spot, we actually have another partner we can use where the tiny home will actually get loaded onto the back of a truck. Now, even if it's been built to 4.3 meters, they've got a super, super low loader, which basically means the load can come in under 4.8 meters, which makes it relatively easy to transport with permits and oversized vehicles, escorts driving with them. And I say relatively in quotations, just because they still need to scout the route. It's a little bit more logistically difficult than just towing a 4.3 meter high home. But they also have a tractor that sits on the back of the flatbed with them that they can basically use to get even the biggest of tiny homes into really difficult spaces. And on that note, I'm not sure how many of the listeners follow us on Instagram or anything like that. And I'm not sure if you've seen it either. But if you hop onto our Instagram, we posted a reel a few days ago of our most recent delivery, which was a 9-meter double loft Byron Bay. And it had to get down a very tricky, steep driveway with a camber around a hard hairpin turn, and then a second hard hairpin turn coming down onto an angle to get it up onto a slab. And these guys made it look like the easiest thing in the world. So we're confident now that we have partners across the industry that can get even the biggest of homes into the most complex of spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. It is a whole business in itself. And I have full respect for tiny house delivery companies as well, or people that are doing that, because some of the situations and the terrain and the conditions that they have to get through, can be, I mean, as you named one of those, and you also talked about Rick and Marty as well. I always see, different videos online of, the close calls that they've had between, whether it's getting through trees or really small places or, whatever it might be. And yeah, Mark actually delivered my tiny home, and I definitely recommend him too. I think that, yeah, these guys are able to just get tiny homes amazingly into so many different kinds of situations and locations. And it seems like nothing is too hard. So that's great. And it's good that you've got access to Australia wide as well. So I know you spoke a little bit before just about some things that you're working on or that are coming up for you, but do you want to let us know if there's anything else that we should be looking out for, or any, you know, exciting projects that are coming up for you later this year?
Yeah, we've got a few things in the pipeline that we're really excited about. The main thing at the moment, I guess, that we're really excited about is the off-grid factory. That's going to be a factory that we own, which is obviously, yeah, it's going to help us with our waste management systems. It's going to make it easier for us to manage recycling. It's also going to make it obviously off-grid, which furthers our mission. So that's one thing that we're really excited about. And then the other thing that we weren't sure if we were going to share it, but why not? We're actually building a couple of Airbnbs that are going to be set up anywhere from all over Australia, essentially, is the goal. I'm sure people have seen companies like Into the Wild and Unyoked. These companies were an inspiration to us when we got into this. And originally, we were hoping to set these up sooner, but we realized obviously it's quite capital intensive to set up Airbnbs. But fortunately, we're at a size now of a company where we're going to start rolling out these escapes in remote locations so that people can test out and try out what the removed lifestyle is like. And, you know, if they enjoy it and if they end up wanting to decide to build a home with us, we're going to obviously offer them kickbacks in a way where, you know, the cost of their escape will come off the cost of their home if they end up buying a home and stuff like that. So that's obviously a whole nother revenue stream for us as a company. So we're extremely excited about adding that. And we have a couple of expos coming up as well. So we'll be at the Sydney Expo in May, Toowoomba in June, and we'll be in Brisbane in September. We were hoping to make it to Geelong in March, but it's probably going to be a push for us to get there in time with our first Airbnb model. So yeah, unfortunately, we're probably going to miss that. But yeah, if you want to catch up with us around the country, we'll be around the country and hopefully we'll have an escape near you by the end of the year.
Oh, that is such a good idea. I'm hoping to be at the Sydney Tiny Homes Expo. So if I'm there, I'll definitely come up and say hi in person. But I love the idea of the Airbnb and people being able to go stay in one of your homes and experience, you know, maybe an off-grid life, especially for something that is completely new or just super a bit of a jump from, you know, maybe the way that they've been living for such a long time, to actually get a taste of, okay, well, can I do this? Can I live in a smaller space? Can I live in a different way with the resources that I use? And so, yeah, that is a really great idea. And yeah, I can't wait to see what happens with all of that. And do you guys want to let everyone know where they can come and find you online? You already mentioned your Instagram page, but if you want to let us know the handle of that, your website, if you have Facebook or anywhere else that you want to direct us to.
Yeah, so we're most active on Instagram, obviously being young lads. That's where we tend to spend most of our time. You can catch us on Facebook as well, Removed Tiny Homes. But our handle on Instagram is @removed.au. And then our website is removedtinyhomes.co, or you can just Google Removed Tiny Homes. We'll show up as well. You can check us out online, send us through an inquiry for a free consultation. We can have a chat, book a schedule in a tour. And fortunately for us as well, we have some clients in and around the Gold Coast hinterland area that love showing off their homes and welcome us to bring in clients around, and we can show off-grid homes with decks and show people how systems work once they're all set up as well. So we can always organize one of those visits as well if people want to see how everything all goes together and works. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us with a DM or anything like that on Instagram as well. We're always really active on there. Yeah, that's probably the easiest ways to reach us.
Fantastic. I'll put a link in the show notes at tinyhouseconversations.com for, you know, everywhere that people can come and find you. And I just want to say, Brendan and Bayden, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really great to get to know more about what you guys are doing at Removed. And as I said, I'm super impressed with just everything that you're doing and your mission and, you know, the extent that you're going to bring sustainable building and healthy living and, you know, just healthier homes into the tiny house space. So thank you so much for what you do. And also thank you for your time today.
Yeah, honestly, thank you so much for it as well. Thank you for having us, Lucy. And we're proud of where we're at, and we're really excited about where we're going. And we hope that we've given some knowledge to the listeners, and that if they're keen or interested in hearing more or getting to know us personally, then yeah, feel free to reach out. And thank you for what you're doing in the tiny house space as well. Without you and without you getting this knowledge out there, I think it would be very difficult for a lot of potential clients to really sift through all the information that's out there.
Yeah, it is a bit of a minefield. Hey, it's good to try and get it all in one place. So yeah, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that too. And before I close out the show, I actually feel called right now in this moment to just say, because I know that many tiny house builders or building company, the heads of building companies listen to this podcast. I want to say now, if you're one of those people, go back and listen to this podcast again, take some notes, because Brendan and Bayden are talking about stuff that I think is really important, that we need to do better in the tiny house space when it comes to building healthier homes. And I feel like it's a next level service and care for your clients, for your customers, to not only help them, change their life in many different ways for the better, but also to look after their health, because, what's more important than our health? And you probably want to watch what Remove Tiny Homes is going to be doing later in the year. So yeah, I just felt really strongly about saying that, because it is something that I'm passionate about. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll know that I've had all these different healthy tiny homes and building biology people come on, because yeah, what's more important than our health? So thank you so much for listening to us, for being here, and make sure you go check out everything that Removed is doing. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes at tinyhouseconversations.com. Stay tuned every Thursday for new episodes of the podcast, and I'll see you next week. Thanks again for listening. And if you enjoyed the conversation today, you found it valuable, and you want to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So here are 3 ways that you can support the podcast. Number 1, if you have a friend or family member that you feel would benefit from hearing these conversations, feel free to share it with them, email them, text them, send them a telegram, do whatever you need to do to share it with them. Number 2, if you hit the subscribe button, you'll know exactly when the next episode is live. And number 3, if you head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode.